Can you sit here? I just want to test it.
Sure. Sit here. Get some chance in case I get warm or thirsty. All right. Are people watching on the live? I see it. Yeah, I think we're still on the live stream. We're fooling around with the live stream right now.
Okay. We are going to go live very shortly. We are going to go live shortly, folks. Hang in there. We are live.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at Busboys and Poets Brooklyn tonight. My name is Chip Gibbons. I'm the Policy Director of Defending Rights and Dissent. I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. But first, I just really want to thank Andy and Busboys for having us tonight. This is the 20th year of Busboys in D.C. Politics happens, decisions are made, many of them quite bad, and in spite of that, there aren't a lot of spaces where we can have discussions with these perspectives. And if you've read Andy's memoir, which you should, or if you went to his talk on the 20th anniversary, you'll know that's exactly the reason why we set up Busboys, and it is an incredibly vital need in our city. And over the last 19 years, I've been coming to Busboys. The best events I've been to in DC have been right here. So thank you, Andy. Yeah. Thank you, Busboys. Infantry Rights and Dissent is a national civil liberties organization that defends your right to know and freedom to act through grassroots mobilization, policy expertise, public education, advocacy journalism. If you'd like to learn more about us and what we're doing, there's a QR code on your table, as well as information about our next event, which will be at the Institute for Policy Studies and about Occupy Wall Street. Over our 6 decades of existence, government insiders who have come forward with compelling information about constitutional violations or human rights abuses have always worked alongside of us. This is in part because we need their firsthand accounts to expose to the public the types of issues we work on, and also because they embody the best part of the First Amendment by using it to speak freely and helping our right to know. And all too often, we see attacks on their First Amendment rights. So we've both stood with them against attempts to censor them, as well as given them a platform, like we've given to Anthony tonight. I almost said Andy by mistake. Anthony. Too many A names up here. So let me introduce Anthony to you all if you don't know who he is. Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar was commissioned into the United States Army from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He served for 25 years in the Army as a combat infantry officer and as a Special Forces Green Beret. Over his military career, he deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Jordan, Qatar, Tajikistan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. More places than I suspect our Congress knows we have troops. He is a highly decorated combat veteran and was awarded the Purple Heart from being wounded in combat and the Bronze Star for Valor for combat bravery. He was also in Gaza working under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as a contractor from May 17, 2025 to June 26 and resigned in protest. And on September the 30th in the New York Times, there was also a story about the work he has been doing for years to bring to light impunity and lack of accountability within the Special Forces. So Anthony has been telling the truth, blowing the whistle, if you will, not just on what's happening in Gaza, but what's happening with their own military. And it's incredibly an honor to have him tonight. I know we're told there is a ceasefire, but it is a very fragile ceasefire. I believe responsible statecraft described it today as hanging on by a thread. It's the only ceasefire I know of where Israel gets to kill Palestinians, and it still is a ceasefire. And in response to claims that Hamas is not turning over bodies quickly enough, Israel is again reducing aid shipments and weaponizing humanitarian aid. And I hope the ceasefire, I really hope the ceasefire holds. We also are having this event because we have to have accountability. When I was a college freshman during Bush's lame duck period, a Vietnam veteran said to me, the biggest mistake of my generation was we held no one accountable for the Vietnam War. We have to hold Bush and Cheney accountable for the Iraq War. That didn't happen, and we cannot let that happen again with this genocide. We have to finally have accountability for the people in Washington who carry out these crimes and make them possible. So on that, I'm going to start the program. Anthony, I just read through a long list of places. I'm dropping my notes. I read through a long list of places you've served, and you have a very distinguished and long military career. I think you've seen war more than any human being should have to. How did that prepare you for what you saw in Gaza? When you first entered Gaza, how did
Raqqa in Syria and places that I had seen that I thought would never be that bad. And what I witnessed in Gaza, there are no words. It is not war. It is not combat. It is annihilation. It is the deliberate and systematic erasure of people from the earth. Done so with military precision, with planning. Nothing that has happened in Gaza is by accident or incompetence. It is deliberate. And I was not, what I saw, and that I've shared this before, that the casualties and those that have been killed in this genocide is far, far above 100 to 120,000. It is likely, not likely, it will be soon known that it's over 500,000. And hundreds of thousands more will die in the coming weeks from starvation, the continuation of the onset famine, disease, displacement, lack of nutrition, lack of food, lack of medicine. This will be a genocide of our time, and we're seeing it. And when I witnessed it, it will haunt me for the rest of my life. And I have seen things in my life that I thought were the worst, and nothing can prepare someone for that. And what Palestinians live through every day, how conditioned they've come to that, it's something that they will never recover from.
So the line we repeatedly hear from our government is that Israel is the most moral army in the world, that these are precise strikes, and that no other army takes this care with civilians. What would you say, I guess Matt Miller's no longer around, it's someone in the Trump administration. What would you say to one of these talking heads, neither the Biden or Trump administration, who makes that point?
I would say that they are unqualified to make that statement, and I would further say that the Israeli Defense Forces are the most incompetent, immoral fighting force that I have ever worked with, and I have trained villagers in barangays in southern Philippines. I have trained villagers and farmers in Afghanistan, and they carried more professionalism and ethics than what I've seen out of the Israeli Defense Forces. They are, the way I had this discussion with a senator recently, because their retorts to me explaining what I saw was that, well, Hamas has it coming, they deserve it. And I said to him, I said, well, can we agree that there is a lot of death? There is a lot of killing, indiscriminate on one side more so than the other. And that the agent of that death is munitions and bombs that we provide. And regardless of deserving it or not, there is an indiscriminate, disproportionate, and immeasurable amount of killing. And then his response was, well, those are unfortunate incidents. Okay, well, hospitals, schools, mosques, playgrounds, children's centers, daycares, tents, UN encampments bombed all the time. If they're that incompetent, we should not be giving them 2,000-pound bombs. And if it's not an accident, and what they're doing is deliberate, then we should definitely not continue to give them 2,000-pound bombs. The Joint Deployed Area Munition, it's called a JDAM. It's a GBU or a guided munition. They don't have, we give them those. We give them all of those. It's not like they use theirs and we're giving them more. We are the only country that produces them. And we give them to them hand over fist. In fact, we have given them so many over the last 2 years alone that we no longer have enough in our arsenal if we had to defend ourselves. That's a fact. So when you see, in looking into Gaza and seeing the destruction, it's absolutely no question in my mind that they have dropped thousands of 2,000-pound bombs and have destroyed everything that stands. They have. And they've done it with the munitions that we continue to give them willingly, wittingly, deliberately. And it's shameful. It's really shameful.
So I want to take a step back for a moment and talk about how you got in Gaza. You mentioned you were hired by UG Solutions because of your military experience. Who is UG Solutions and what is their relationship to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? And what were your interactions with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation like?
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation doesn't really exist. Case in point, its director at the time, when I first went into Gaza, the 26th of May. On the 24th of May, I went in with the Israeli army, and we did a reconnaissance of the sites to see exactly how we would establish security. On the 25th, we went back in to begin to prepare the sites for distribution. And on the 26th of May was supposed to be our big day. Here comes America. We're going to feed Palestinians. We're here to save the day. And the director of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, Jake Wood, former Blackwater, stepped down from the job. I was like, it's like if you're in an airplane and the pilot jumps out. I mean, what is going on? And his reasoning was because, from what he saw, this operation would not be conducted in accordance with the humanitarian principles. This is a guy that once worked for Blackwater. And you're like, whoa, like that's okay, that's something to look at. In comes Johnny Moore. Mr. Johnny Moore, never met the man, but he is a self-proclaimed, I've not given this title, self-proclaimed Christian Zionist. He then took the helm of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. 2 days ago, actually yesterday, he stepped down from his position. This is a man that for months has been saying it's the most Christian thing to do. It's the most successful operation going on. It's the best. And he stepped down. And he's taken a new job across the street over here at Pepperdine as their vice chancellor. Stepped down. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation isn't a thing. It's an idea. A way to filter money through a non-government organization, a non-profit, to then funnel it directly into a profit organization, which is Safe Reach Solutions, then brings in UG Solutions. UG Solutions is a small contract company out of North Carolina, Davidson, North Carolina, about 45 minutes from where I live, that came up out of nowhere in January. Safe Reach Solutions popped up out of nowhere in March. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation popped up out of nowhere in late February. So you have these companies that pop up that seemingly have no past performance, that win these lucrative contracts, which in the contracting world is unheard of. So UG Solutions around the May time frame, May 13th precisely, I get a phone call. And at this point, I was retired. I retired in March from 25 years. I did not intend to go back to work. I did not intend to work for a contractor or in defense or for the government. I was bored, so I took on some part-time morning work at Lowe's Garden Center. I was really just trying to reconnect with the world, my family, being a father, being present. And when I got this phone call, and they asked, well, we're putting together these team, your name was given to us, we're calling you, we're looking for people who have this background, are you interested in coming to work for us? I had never heard of UG Solutions. So my first question was, who are you? And they explained to me that they were standing up this security apparatus to be able to Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to go in to deliver aid in lieu of what the United Nations under UNRWA was doing. And to me, my assumption, I go into all things with facts and assumptions. An assumption was that the United States was going to be part of this endeavor as a good faith actor. That we were going to be involved because we were going to feed starving people. Were people in Gaza starving? Fact. Were we on the threshold of a famine? Fact. Was the UN mechanism under UNRWA and other NGOs stopped from going in, regardless of the why? Fact. I felt that the United States was going in under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in this joint endeavor with the Israeli government as a good faith actor. And I said, yes, I'll go. I felt that the complexity of the operation, that if we were going to go in and take over 400 distribution sites in a war zone, that they would need people that had that level of experience. Mind you, the majority of the people that they hired were the Infidels Motorcycle Club.
Could you explain what that was? Because I had never heard of them before meeting you. I've since seen their name a lot, but you are the first person to ever tell me about the Infidels Motorcycle Club.
I had not heard of them either. Apparently there are motorcycle clubs in our country where grown men call themselves infidels. But in order to be a part of this motorcycle club, you must have served in the military. You must be a veteran to be a part of it. I didn't know this organization until I got into Israel. The second day we arrived, we're standing on the hilltop at Sderot. Go look this up afterwards. Sderot is a location in Israel just outside the border with Gaza that overlooks Gaza City. On this spot, the Israeli Ministry of Defense, through COGAT, the Coordinating Office for the Governance of the Territories, it's a government agency within Israel, has established a picnic site. Vending machines, photo opportunity, the big binoculars you can put a quarter in, like on the Empire State Building, photo op, scenic stop to look at the bombing going on in Gaza City. And you can stand there and watch it. This is in the news. I mean, this is open source information. And they took us there and we stood there, and I was kind of looking around because I didn't know any of these other contractors, and I see so many of them they all had the same tattoo, a Crusader's cross, infidels, the bottom banner being 1095, which if you know that's the year of the First Crusade, and Pope Urban declared that all Muslims were vermin that should be eradicated from the earth. And I was like, why do they all have the same tattoo? Did I miss the tattoo? Was there a tattoo station when we got into Israel? Like, everybody had it. And I was like, what is this? And they're like, oh, what chapter are you in? I'm like, I'm not in any chapter. I don't know what this is. And I learned about it, and I thought to myself, well, that just doesn't add up. If you're supposed to be distributing humanitarian aid to starving people. And the Infidels Motorcycle Club, again, you must be a veteran to be a part of it. Their charter, why they exist, is to fight jihad globally, and in the spirit of Pope Urban in 1095, to eradicate all Muslims from the earth. And here you have this Christian alt-right organization who volunteered, who was selected to be the security apparatus going into Gaza armed with machine guns and fully automatic rifles and stun grenades and shotguns and tear gas and live ammunition to deliver aid to a predominantly Arab Muslim population. That doesn't make sense unless the intent was to kill people, that would be the perfect agents to do that. So that's the Infidels Motorcycle Club, and that was one of the things that when I realized that and I put those pieces together, that it made me sick. I was like, how is this even a thing? I didn't even know that organizations like that existed.
It makes me sick too, and this is the third time I've heard you share this fact, and every time I'm just going to say disbelief. But no matter how many times, and journalists have confirmed this. I want to be clear that, like, you've been telling people this, and various journalists have gone out and actually confirmed.
Well, so that information, that story was uncovered by journalists doing their own research. I didn't lead them to that. It's that obvious when you see pictures of guys in Gaza and they all line up, sticking up the middle finger with the American flag that says Gaza Lago, and they all have the same tattoos and they post it on their webpage. It doesn't take a genius to put those pieces together. Now, the individual that did the BBC piece, to show you the intelligence of this organization, I guess, he emailed the chapter president, who was the guy put in charge of the entire contract, and said, doing this story. Found your Facebook page, you had some things on there, I wanted to ask you some questions. I'm doing the story, I'm giving you right to respond. Well, this individual responded to his entire club distribution email list, but forgot that the reporter was on it. So when he responded, he gave the reporter the contact to everyone in the club. I mean, it's mind-boggling. I mean, I didn't even have to lead them onto it. They found it themselves, and they told me, hey, we're doing this story. can you at least confirm that these people were there? I'm like, yeah, they were there. What are y'all doing? They're like, oh, we're doing a story in Infidels. So I was like, wow, y'all found out on your own? Like, it's not hard. So, yeah, it's mind-boggling.
So I want to take a step back again. So Israel kicks out UNRWA and the legitimate humanitarian organizations. Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is set up as a nonprofit. It gets money from the U.S. It then hires Safe Reach Solutions, which is a for-profit corporation, which then hires UG Solutions, which is also a for-profit corporation. That's a lot of for-profit corporations getting money that is supposed to be for a nonprofit purpose. Did you ever witness any conflicts between these organizations' profit motives and the humanitarian mission they were supposed to be performing?
So prior to going on this mission, I had read and heard about the weaponization of aid, the weaponization of humanitarian assistance. I didn't really understand that. I understood the words, but I didn't understand, like, what does that look like? Well, I experienced exactly what that looks like, in that within Gaza, the operations at the distribution sites are physical pieces of property owned and controlled by Kodak. This property was then, the coordinating office of the governance and the territories. So the territories being Gaza and the West Bank.
Is that an Israeli entity?
It's an Israeli entity that is directly underneath the Ministry of Defense that is responsible for, so it's a military hierarchy, military individuals, IDF people run it, and they are in charge of the territories. Anything that goes in, anything that goes out. So when you hear doctors that say, we tried to go in, but we couldn't, that's the office that denies entry or approves it. So Safe Reach Solutions, which was founded and owned by a career CIA ground branch operator, doesn't sound very humanitarian. That company has a contract with the Israeli government through Kodak. So the Israeli government says, UN, UNRWA, you're not going in anymore. Hey, we need an unbiased, unilateral, independent humanitarian organization to deliver food. Who wants to do it? Safe Reach Solutions says, oh, we will. And Israel says, got it. How are we going to do it? Well, let's set up a contract. That contract, just like any contract, if you want to build a house and you hire a contractor who then hires subcontractors, plumbers and electricians, they're going to build the house to the specifications of which you provide and which you pay them. Nothing more, nothing less. And that is what existed in the mechanism for delivering aid. How many trucks would go in? How much food would go in? This became very clear to me because after being there within the first few days, I was promoted into a position to be the Joint Tactical Operations Director. So between both operation sites, we had an operational site in Karim Shalom, south, in the Israeli side, and up at Gate 96, Nakal Oz, outside of Kibbutz Be'eri in the north, and then 4 sites. And I had oversight of all of them. And on the very first day of distribution, the 27th of May, secure distribution site number 1, which was in southern Rafah, which is gone now. We had estimated 27 to 34,000 starving, displaced Palestinians coming to this site in one mad rush. And after the smoke cleared, literally, and we realized that we had not nearly enough food for that many people, though we should have, by if you look at what the UN provided, I asked, well, we got to fix this because the water trucks didn't get in. Where was the water? And I was told, well, we're not providing the water. I was like, what do you mean we're not providing the water? I mean, that's, 1, you got to have water. 2, all of the food we're providing them. So when you hear the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation make proclamations of meals, they're not providing a meal. They're providing a box full of dry parcel goods, flour, rice, lentils, sugar, cooking oil, nothing that's prepared, and all things of which you need water to cook. No water. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't incompetence. That wasn't ineptitude. That was clear because the contract did not stipulate providing water. If I come to a restaurant and I order from my waiter, I would like this menu item, and they bring me the food, and they bring me no water or a drink, like we didn't order. That's exactly what the process was there. The contract didn't just not have water, it stipulated no water, under the premise that Kogat, from the Israeli side, would be pumping potable water into Gaza. When I was told that, I didn't believe it, because there's no water. People are drinking out of pumps. People are collecting rainwater. So I was like, where are these pump stations? So I went to these pump stations, and not one of them was operating. The deprivation and specifically providing no water to a starving population, that 96% of which lives in open sewage, that was part of the contract. This operation, in terms of delivering aid into Gaza, was designed that way. There was an organization called the Boston Consulting Group. 2 days after Jake Wood stepped down from being the director of GHF, the Boston Consulting Group stepped away and said, we can't be a part of this anymore. By the way, Prime Minister Milakowski, aka Netanyahu, I don't call him Netanyahu. Milakowski, look it up, he's Polish. Netanyahu's not his real name. Milakowski worked for the Boston Consulting Group as his first job out of college, right here in the United States. Funny that they got the contract for this new lucrative aid operation. So when you start to connect the dots, it paints a very clear picture. So the Boston Consulting Group designed the sites, how they would operate, the input and output of the flow of people, but also they were instrumental in the design of the day after plan, which was, we hear this, what after, what's the day after? We've seen it, it's been leaked, it's been out in the public, this resort, this Riviera in Gaza. They designed that, this organization. So when I went to the sites, the first time I went to the sites and I looked at them, the IDF took us to these sites on the 24th of May. Combat units put us in their vehicles and they took us to these locations. I've been in a lot of war. I've been deployed to 12 combat rotations in 4 different wars. I know what war looks like. I've planned it, I've fought it, I've lived through it. And when I got to the location, immediately I looked at the maps that they provided us and I was like, we cannot deliver or distribute humanitarian aid or anything to a civilian population from these locations. Well, why not? Well, there's this thing called the Geneva Convention. It falls under the Geneva Convention. It falls under the International Humanitarian Law, which dictates how wars are persecuted. It also includes subcontext of the laws of armed conflict and the laws of land warfare, of which Israel has been a signatory to since 1952, and so have we. This violates that. How? How? The leadership, how? How does this violate that? Well, where these distribution sites have been built deliberately, on a map, on a location, and built, is directly in the middle of the combat engagement area of Operation Gideon's Chariots. That was the offensive in the south to clear Rafah, clear Khan Yunis, and clear Mawasi, and clear the central part of Gaza. Everything up to the Netzarim corridor. So these sites were deliberately built in an area that would force a transient displaced population of non-combatants, civilians, women and children, men, fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, to traverse through an active combat zone to get to food. So what was offered to them was starve and die in place or risk coming to get it. The report that you heard of hundreds and thousands of Palestinians dying near these sites, coming to or leaving, that is true. Every day, as thousands of displaced Palestinians came to these sites, the IDF would control the crowd. Imagine thousands control the crowd with machine gun fire, tanks, artillery, killing hundreds every day. That was by design.
What do you mean by control with machine gun fire?
So this was something that really bothered me, to where another data point of what's really going on here. Bullets are expensive. Well, it's not expensive for the IDF, we give them bullets. But they're expensive. 7.62 millimeter ammunition that fires out of a machine gun, 5.56 millimeter that fires out of a standard issued rifle, artillery rounds 155, 105, mortar rounds 120 millimeter mortar. It's all expensive. We give it. So, as a crowd would queue up, they would get advertisement would go out through Kogat, through various means of, hey, site 1 is going to have food today. We didn't open all sites at the same time. At any given time, we had only 1 or 2 sites open. 400 sites in the UN, 1 to 2 sites daily for us. So thousands would come to these sites. In order to get to these sites, if you live everything north of the Netzarim corridor into Gaza City, Jabalia, and Beit Hanun was cut off. No one from the north could come south, and no one from the south could go north. So that isolated central Gaza. Rafah, the city of Rafah, had already been leveled to the ground. Nothing left. Hospitals, schools, mosques, gone. Nothing left. So in this part between the Morag military corridor and the Netzarim military corridor was Khan Yunis, Mawasi, and Palestinians would have to come to these sites south of the Morag corridor. Well, the trick is, once you traverse south of the Morag corridor, you can't go home. All 3 sites were built south of the Morag corridor. So you're now forcefully displacing the population to the south. And in doing so, imagine thousands of people coming onto a site. Imagine, if you will, a Walmart on a Black Friday, back before you could do everything online, right? Thousands of people outside but imagine instead of just TVs or cheap linens, there's in the whole the shop, in the whole Walmart, it's cleared out, and in the middle of it, there's just a big pile of money. $1 million in cash. And there's only one way in, one door, and thousands of people are queuing up. And the guard just goes click and runs away. Everybody comes in. And there's also only one way out, that door. Imagine the crowd and the chaos that would now multiply that by thousands. Now put that into a situation where people are starving. In these crowds, you would see fathers carrying their dead children, starved to death. To see when Western media looks at these images that come out of there and say, well, that's propaganda, it infuriates me. Fathers carrying dead children, mothers carrying dead children. That is generational dehumanization, and it's intentional. Force the population to beg for food by the hand that feeds you, under the yoke of oppression, and die doing it. And if you survive, you don't get to go home. That distant boom you heard as you were walking towards these sites was your neighborhood. You have nowhere to go. At intersections to get from the coastal corridor if you look at the imagery coming out now, you see hundreds of thousands of people along the coastline. That's the Al Rashid Road. That's the coastal corridor. Anyone moving south is forced along that corridor if they want to move to the south. So all the sites were in the south. So as they come to the Murad corridor, at two critical locations, the intersection of the Murad corridor and the coastal corridor, and then along the Murad corridor to each of the sites, were intersections to where thousands of people coming to these sites, mind you, many of them weren't from the south, they were from central. So they didn't know the way. There's no Waze or Google Maps that shows you how to get to these sites. So as these thousands of people are rushing down, all they see on the horizon is lights and they're running. Well, the IDF, in their battle positions, remember, these locations were built in active combat zones, where you have IDF platoons and companies in position. The way they would control the crowd, you know, if you're looking at 1,000 people coming, I want them to go left, well, I'm just gonna shoot at them. I suggested, like, why don't we put out a sign? Like, it would be a lot cheaper. Put a sign and a little light that says turn left. That would be effective. Nope, not in the budget. So that is the method in which the IDF controlled the crowd. Again,
By shooting at them.
Go ahead.
By shooting at them.
By shooting at them with fully automatic machine guns. I don't know if anyone here has military experience, if you were ever a tanker, but on a main battle tank, you have that big gun, right? Boom. Well, with that tank, you also have what's called a coaxial machine gun. It's a machine gun that parallels the main gun, to where if you see something that doesn't require a tank round, you shoot it with a machine gun. So they would fire from the Markava tank with their coaxial machine gun, which you aren't shooting with any type of precision. That is an area weapon. A coaxial machine gun, 7.62 millimeter, could kill everybody in this room with a few bursts of a trigger. Like that. That is what they would shoot the crowd with. And when someone tells me that they're disciplined and they're professional, I say, bullshit. They're not.
So we've heard reports of there have been a lot of Palestinians who've been killed at least 8 sites. You've described them as death traps. How much of this killing do you think is gross negligence, incompetence, recklessness, where you're firing machine guns at people to tell them to go left as opposed to putting a sign up? And how much of it do you think could be intentional, considering the fact that it does seem like Israel was intentionally carrying out a genocide in Gaza? They did block humanitarian aid from reaching Gaza, and they forced people to walk through a war zone to these sites where people were murdered.
Well, again, my first assumption was that the United States was participating in this operation as a good faith actor. So I went into it thinking that, is this environment complex? Yes. Is this environment complicated? Yes. Complexity and complicated are not excuses for gross negligence and incompetence. I looked at the situation as, okay, those that are involved in this are grossly incompetent, and we need to figure this out. In fact, after the very first day of distribution, when our site was overwhelmed by what was, like I said, estimated between 27 to 34,000 human beings, I was standing on that site, and as the line that was queuing up about 800 meters away, almost a kilometer, was released, and these Palestinians came to the site, I couldn't see them because there was a berm, but all I saw in the distance was dust and the ground shaking. From almost a kilometer away from people. And I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. So like, okay, this is incompetence. This is a complicated problem set. Let's figure this out. And every recommendation we made, let's change up the time. Let's do 3 sites at once to disperse the crowd differently so we don't have this many people going on to one site. Let's do the northern site and the southern site so the population is being split so we don't have mass grouping in an area where they're conducting active combat operations. This is a wild idea. Let's put the sites somewhere that aren't in active combat. There are areas where there aren't actual offensive operations, clearing operations going on. We can put them there. All of those decisions were discounted. Nope, 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 nope. On the early on the 28th of May, we were split between two sites, and site number 2 was overran, I would say. So many people came onto the site that security couldn't hold it. So they gave up the site. That caused us to then have what's called an AAR, or an after action report, with the Israeli Defense Force commander for the South. So it's like 2 in the morning. They put us in their vehicles. They drive us into Gaza. They drive us to their command outpost, and they take us into this room, this headquarters, this field headquarters. And as we're sitting there talking about, okay, how are we going to do the sites tomorrow? Which site are we going to run? I'm just looking at this map, this operations map, and I'm just looking at it. I'm a tactician. I'm an operations tactician and a strategist. I did it for 25 years. I commanded battalions. And in looking at that map, I'm just looking at it. You can see where the offensive operations graphics in the areas that they were in, the forced displacement of the population to these sites. And it dawned on me as I'm sitting there, like, this is not incompetence. This is intentional. This is planned. This is done on purpose. We, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, we, Safe Route Solutions, we, UG Solutions, we, the United States, are complicit and partners in the design of mass killing at scale. If you think of the overall operation in Gaza, the dropping of bombs, offensive operations on the ground, that's one aspect of a military operation. Military operations have many aspects, one of which being psychological. Psychological operations are ingrained in military operations. Part of that is dehumanization of the population. How do you do that? Starve them to death and make them beg for food. Well, the bombing is going on and the shooting is going on. That's one aspect. We see that all the time, and that catches our attention. Oh my God. But then you have the underlying operation of displacing the population. How do you get the population to go from here to here? Well, take away the food and then force them to come get it. And then don't let them go home. And as I'm looking at the operation, and I'm looking at Boston Consulting Group's involvement from the early days, in that moment, it dawned on me, this is why Jake Wood left. This is why he stepped down. This is why everybody is jumping ship. Like the Titanic, everybody's jumping overboard, looking for a lifeboat. And I was at one point infuriated, and one point disgusted, and one point saddened that what I had witnessed with indiscriminate shooting in mass, children being killed, unarmed. Imagine if you're a father and your family is starving, and the only food available that you hear from someone that told you, that someone said, that if you travel here, there's food. And you go there, and you get killed doing it. And then your family back home. Where did dad go? So the next day, you wait. And your children are starving. And there's no baby formula, and there's no water, and there's no edible food. There's no way to cook the food. And your children are dying. So the mother says, well, I'll have to go. And then she never comes home. And then what happens to those children? Well, they end up in a UN encampment that then gets bombed by accident. Every aspect of this is by design. We're talking about an area that is 26 kilometers by 6 to 4 kilometers, depending on the stretch of the enclave. This is not a big area. Every piece of this, the starvation, the bombing, the targeting, it's by design. And we, the United States, are hand in glove with the Israelis in doing it. Our tax dollars, our citizens, us, our leaders, our politicians, we're deeply involved. And it is sickening.
Would you describe this? Would you describe this as genocide?
It is. Going there and seeing it, I asked myself, genocide, what is it? Genocide, homicide, suicide, infanticide. What is genocide? It has a definition. This isn't a word we throw around for hyperbole or because it sounds dramatic. Genocide has a definition. The ethnic cleansing of a population in a specific area of a specific ethnic or religious group that is oppressed by another is a genocide. It is the definition of a genocide. If I like your shirt and I say, sir, your shirt, I love the blue, yellow. And you're like, you mean green? That's a definition. We call it that. We call it green. Oh, I'm going to call it blue, yellow because I don't want to call it green because green pisses them off. Nope, it's green. It's a genocide. Period.
So you had interactions with some of the Palestinians who were seeking aid, including a young boy named Amir. Could you talk about some of it? It's not too difficult. Could you talk about what were they like? What did you notice about them? What were your interactions with them? Were they hostile? Were they grateful? What was their disposition? Did you feel threatened by them?
You know, on the late morning of the 27th of May, as these hundreds of, or just say tens of thousands, came over this berm into this site, if the Palestinians had any ill intent, they could have killed us all. It was 200 to 1. They could have just picked us up and carried us away. We didn't have enough, there wouldn't be enough ammunition to stop them. And as they're coming over the site and they're grabbing the food, and it's just chaos all around. Imagine like in like Braveheart, one of those battle scenes, right? And just people are everywhere. And as these thousands are coming over the berm in just a mass, I looked at that and I'm like, well, this is where it ends, Tony. This is where it ends. Just had a good life. And as getting the food, I got knocked to the ground. And the man that stopped to pick me up wasn't an American, wasn't an Israeli. It's Palestinian. A man who was there to get food for his family stopped to pick me up and hugged me and went on to grab the food that was next to me. In my entire time in Gaza, and I didn't just work at one site, one location, one area, in and out for a photo shoot. I was there day after day, hour after hour, all 4 sites. I never saw one armed Palestinian. In all the shooting that I witnessed, of the IDF shooting in one way, I never saw any return fire. I never saw anyone armed. Everyone that came to the sites, even when there was no food left, when they were promised food, imagine traveling 8 to 10 kilometers without shoes, without water, knowing that your family is starving to get food and there's none left. What would you do? I mean, in this country, we shoot people if they walk into our yard. And I was always greeted with kindness, with gratitude, with hope, with, at times, sadness. My family is starving. When you see a mother whose husband, the father of her children, who was killed in an airstrike, and she's pulling a wooden pallet, and on that wooden pallet are her dead children. And in seeing that, isn't anger, but mercy, help. How do you then look at someone like that and shoot them? There was a young boy, and I'll go into the after story because there are some things that you experience in life that make you so upset. You just have to just accept it and move on. So distribution site number 3 was our site that was nearest Khan Yunis. And on that day, much like many of the days as people came through the sites to get food, those that were left at the end, women, children, the disabled, the most vulnerable of the population that arguably would say needs the food the most. And as the last bit of the crowd is there picking through scraps of food that are left, not boxes, not meals, just imagine, if you will, a child picking up dirt from the ground and shaking it out to get noodles, and then puts it in their little bag. How's that child going to cook that food? And this young boy, his name was Amir, comes up to me. One of the contractors and I, we were standing towards the back edge of where the crowd was, just observing. And he had walked up to me, and as he's walking up, I see him from a distance. And in his hand, he's carrying these scraps that he had picked up. Again, no way to cook it. This isn't food that this child could eat. It's just food. To give you some context to this child's life, which we found out later, not in the moment, but we do know, his father was killed in an airstrike. He was from Khan Yunis. His father was killed in an airstrike. During the evacuation of that area, he was separated from his biological mother. Those that were separated were moved down to the UN camp, the internally displaced persons, IDP camp in the south, where a family had taken him in. On that day, he was going to Site 3 with one of the elders of the family that had taken him in, and they were separated because they'd been shot at. He's on this site alone, 8 to 10 years old, hard to tell because of their malnutrition. No older than my son, about the same age. And he's there alone, in a war zone. He's wearing no shoes. His skin, you can see where the scabies has already started. The malnutrition. And he walks up to us, and I see him from a distance, and we kind of call him over, and he comes up, and the contractor who's standing next to me reaches out his hand to him, and he comes up and he kisses his hand. Amir kisses his hand, puts it to his forehead, and says, "Shukran." And he talks to me, and he kisses my hand. And as this boy then walks away with the rest of the group, as they exit through the site, the IDF had already began dispersing the crowd that had left. There were thousands there. This group was kind of in the rear, in the last, and we were telling them to leave. And the IDF had already begun firing at the crowd to keep them going west. You exit the site, you can go east or you can go west. Well, they don't want them to go east because there's a military outpost there, so they were firing at them from the Markava tank machine gun to go west. Coming off of Site 3, there's a berm that separates the IDF position from the distribution site. If you're on the east side of the distribution site, the IDF, and you're firing at the intersection, you can't see the exit to the site. Like, I can't see the other side of that curtain. You can't see who's coming. And they're opening fire. And as this group is leaving, to include Amir, he's gunned down with many other unarmed combatants. And this young boy, like hundreds and thousands of other children, fathers, mothers, grandfathers, unarmed civilians, none of them are armed. They were there to get food. Not even a rock was thrown. Gunned down. And then after each distribution, the IDF would come through with their front-loading bulldozers to flatten the area out. And in that are all those that were dead. buried under rubble, under dirt. Right now, as we speak, distribution site 4, 1, and 2 that have been abandoned by the GHF, abandoned, overnight, gone, left them. Palestinians are not going back to those sites to see, this is where my father was shot, that I couldn't get. This is where my son was killed, that I couldn't get him. And they're finding these bodies around these sites. Around GHF sites, they're finding the bodies of unarmed, dead family members. Right now, as we speak, they're finding them. And looking at that, in that moment, that young boy looking at me in the eyes, the vulnerability, the trust, looking at that young boy and knowing, in my heart, looking at him knowing that he likely would not survive this war. And if we keep supporting Israel in what they're doing, and if we continue to fund them with weapons and arms and impunity and sanctions and vetoes and allowing them to do it, no one will survive. And this young boy, as he looks at me, and he's walking away, scared. Imagine a child, dead. There is not one Palestinian that I've met that either didn't kiss me or thank me or hug me. Not one bit of malintent. So when Ambassador Huckabee or Secretary Rubio or when the President of the United States or when Ben-Gvir or Smotrich or Milikowski say they're all Hamas, shame them. These are human beings.
So are Hamas.
To that point too, the creation and the establishment of Hamas was established within the United Nations General Assembly for an armed opposition or an armed force against opposition. It is a fact that Israel is an occupying force in Gaza. That's a fact. It is a fact that the UN General Assembly in 1948 dictated that those lands should be given back to the Palestinians after the 1947 Nakba. And that Hamas and its establishment as a armed force against that opposition, that oppression, that occupation. An occupying force doesn't have right of self-defense. I didn't make that up. That's the law. So, last week I was in Boston, and we were there demonstrating against the Boston Consulting Group. Their flagship headquarters building is there. 200 meters away from the Boston Harbor. And I was talking to them, questions much like this, and I said, 254 years ago, there was a group of people who decided that they weren't going to put up with tyranny and being taxed without representation and being killed by occupiers of their land, and that they had a right to self-determination. And they even wrote a document for it. What happened to those people? What happened to that country? Well, that was us. So why is it that we look at the Palestinians and think, well, they're all terrorists? It's a lie. Now, I do not condone violence and killing. However, how long can you step on someone's neck before they bite back?
in Washington, D.C. If you could say something to the Congress, the President, Mike Huckabee, well, he's in Israel, Marco Rubio, what would it be? Assume if they were in this room right now, that they're not, I wish they were. I'd like for them to hear stories like the one about Amir and what's been going on in our name and with their complicity. What would you say to them?
Well, today, outside of the Truman building, the headquarters of the State Department, little Marco was there today. He's in DC because he met with the foreign minister of Brazil at the White House. I hope that the foreign minister of Brazil gave him a lesson in diplomacy, because Marco Rubio sucks at it. Ambassador Huckabee and Steve Witkoff, who I call Bert and Ernie, when they came into Gaza to see one of the sites, I was like, these are the people that we have in charge? I wouldn't put these two on a bus without telling the driver where to drop them off. Like, these two are, like, this is who's in charge. So what I would tell them, if the three of them were sitting here, is, one, the President of the United States, elected by the people, promised America first. Right now, in our country, we are going on a 17th day of shutdown. The third longest in history. After this, they're second in first place. So if Trump is going for the win, he's on his way. As our government is shut down and we cannot pay our federal employees, we gave Israel 2 weeks ago their annual child support check of $3.8 billion. That is a fact.
And they have national health care.
They have international health care. They have international education. Believe me, if you're in Israel, you're doing just fine off of your paycheck. Right there, her working hard, part of that tax, part of that paycheck is going to Israel. And then they have the gall. Milikowski came here to the United States, to the United Nations, and said, there will never be a Palestinian state. The day before that, our president said we would work towards that. On the day, the following day, he goes from New York City. You know what Milikowski does when he shows up to the White House, right? Y'all have read this. Brings his laundry. That's a fact. When Milikowski and his wife travel to the United States and they show up to the White House, they say, here's my laundry. It's a tradition. I'm serious. These are facts. And
Bold. If someone's giving you billions of dollars and giving you impunity for genocide and war crimes, then ask them to do your laundry, which you bring on a plane across an ocean.
yeah,
And a very convoluted route because he has to avoid.
because he has to avoid anywhere that would arrest him.
Might be arrested.
And who pays for that travel?
I assume
We do. And when he gets here and he says, do my laundry, and as he's sitting in the Oval Office, our president, America first, the president of peace, big bad Donald Trump, says to him, hey, really need you to call the Qataris and apologize. Oh, come on, man. Look, check it out. I know. Like, just do me a solid. Apologize to the Qataris. We got a base there. They give us a break on oil. Qatar is not a country. It's a colonial enclave.
Air base.
It's an air base that we pay for. We pay for rent. It's an Airbnb for our aircraft. Come on, apologize to Qatar. So Trump hands him a script. Here you go. And as he picks up the phone, our president, with the phone in his lap, dials it for him. And here is Milikowski talking on the phone with our president begging him to apologize. And after he's done and he hangs it up, and his laundry's done and folded, and he gets back on the airplane and he flies back to Tel Aviv, and he lands in Tel Aviv, and he goes into the Knesset on Sunday because Saturday is Shabbat, and they're back in session on Sunday in the Knesset. You know what he tells them all? You can look this up. I'm not making this up. You know what he tells them all? We got America right where we want them.
He just says it in Hebrew.
He just says it in Hebrew.
Yeah.
We got America right where we want them. I went to go visit. They kissed the ring. He didn't come to kiss the ring. He came for Donnie to kiss his ring. They will be our bankroll. They will do what we tell them. And everybody claps. And then back that up with 2 days ago, our president, as if that wasn't enough, our president travels to the area. First to Egypt to seal the deal on this great peace plan, and then up to Tel Aviv to talk to the Knesset. And as our president of the United States is standing on the stage, draped with nothing but Israeli flags, not an American flag in sight, and he stands there and he thanks his #1 private donor, who is an Israeli citizen,
Mayor Madison.
dual citizen. And he says to her, "Isn't that great? You wanted me to move the embassy to Jerusalem, and I did it. Isn't that great? We're gonna, and then she says to me, I asked her, who do you love more, Israel or the U.S.? And she wouldn't answer. But I know it's Israel." And he laughs, and everybody claps. This is our president.
By the way, under the definition of anti-Semitism, they are trying to force universities and civil rights bodies to blunt criticism of Israel's proposal. That would meet one of the definitions, but I don't think the ADL or anyone else is going to be complaining about Trump.
If a Hispanic congressman walked into Congress with a sombrero and an MS-13 tattoo, he would be kicked out of the country, whether he was a citizen or not. He'd be shot. This, mark my words, what's going on in the underlying tones of what we see happening in Gaza and the West Bank. Whether, maybe you don't care one bit about a Palestinian, an Arab, an Israeli, where's Gaza? I have done this little test that I like to take to Congress, to the staffers, and I like to take a map and take all the labels off it and say, show me where Israel is. You'd be surprised how many of them don't know. Oh, but they'll talk about you're anti-Semite, or you're this, or you're that. And I ask them, what is a Semite? Because the way I think about it is if you are a Polish Jew that grew up in New Jersey, and you're killing Arabs, you're an anti-Semite. That's by definition. These words have meanings, and we just gloss over it. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm not anti-Jew. My mother's Jewish. I'm not an anti-Jew. My father's Catholic. I am anti-Zionist. Yes, I am absolutely anti-Zionist. I am anti having our country serve as a foreign government's lapdog. Absolutely. But what I will tell all of you, because I have seen it, I saw the start of the Iraq War, and then I fought in it for years. I saw the start of the war in Afghanistan, and then I fought in it for years. I went back to Iraq and saw how the war changed to where now we're not fighting Al-Qaeda, now we're fighting ISIS. Oh, by the way, 2 organizations that we created from the ashes of the Mujahideen in the 1994 wars in the Soviet Union, we created. I fought them into Syria. I have run around the desert chasing American foreign policy without any clue as to where it lands for a quarter century. Okay, it's hard to say that. A quarter century. 25 years of my life fighting in wars with no political objective.
You were 17 when you started.
When I joined.
You joined, yes.
And what is happening right now in Gaza to the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank should scare the hell out of all of us. It scares me. I sometimes see my son asleep in bed at home, and I cry. For what we're leaving for our children. Mark my words. 3 days ago, United States Central Command put 200 U.S. soldiers on the ground. What do you do with 200 soldiers? Nothing. A company has less than 200. You can do nothing with that. But you know what it does offer? A perfect false flag. Put a couple Americans in there, a couple of them get killed. Oh, that's never happened before. I don't know. In every war we fought, the Gulf of Tonkin, every war we've been involved in. And mark my words, because when this draws us in, Israel's greater plan for a greater Israel includes a good chunk of Egypt, all of Palestine, part of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. Do you think they're on board for that? So when Israel says, we've got Palestine, we're not stopping, what do you think is going to happen? An alliance. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia already signed one. And who's going to come in on the side of Israel because we're their lapdog? Us. And we're going to be fighting a war. Mark my words. If you're going to listen to Donald Trump or Jared Kushner about real estate, listen to me about war. When we go into this next war, the seventh war that Westcott talked about, he even said it, we will not have dominance. We will not be fighting tribesmen and terrorist cells. We will be fighting nations that have parity. That means they have fifth-generation fighters. That means they have aircraft carriers. That means they have air dominance and air superiority that we will have to fight to achieve. Hundreds will die. Thousands will die. One U.S. aircraft carrier goes down to the Gulf, that's 5,000 U.S. sailors. It's going to happen if we continue down this path. Trust me. And when it does, do you think Don Jr., do you think Pete Hegseth and his children or Jared Kushner are going to pick up a rifle, ruck up and go and fight? No. You will. We will. Our kids will. Your children and grandchildren will die. Ask me how I know. Do you think my parents growing up in South Texas ever thought that their son would be fighting in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or Tajikistan? Where is Tajikistan? Or the southern Philippines? And that their son would be shot and wounded in battle in places you've never heard of? No. It will happen. Believe me. And when it does, no one from our administration, from Little Marco to Pete Hegseth to Donald Trump to anyone else in the office, will send their children to die. We will.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to go to audience questions. I know I said two more. I'm not sure how we're doing on time. This has been a really powerful event, and we can tell from the back of your pin drop in this room right now. I want to ask a question not about Gaza, but on September the 30th, Matthew Atkins?
Matthew Atkins.
Matthew
Akins. Yeah, Matthew Akins.
Matthew Akins published an article in the New York Times, America's Vigilantes, How War Crime Accusations Against Green Berets Were Denied and Buried. The main source for this article is you and your wife. It's not about Gaza, it's about problems with accountability for human rights abuses in our own military. And you actually began working with this reporter in 2023, I understand, before, is that
directly for this story from an incident from 2015 in Kunduz with the bombing of the hospital in Kunduz.
Can you remind me what that was? To people who forgot.
2015, during the assaults to retake Kunduz from the Taliban. That works great. Taliban are gone now, right? U.S. forces dropped munitions, not once, not twice, but all through the night, on a hospital. Hospital manned by Americans and Europeans, Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, Doctors Without Borders. Huge international incident. And then it was lied about, covered up, swept under the rug. And we went on our way. And we did it again and again and again. And the people that did it were not only promoted, they were put in positions of higher authority. Be like, if my dad gave me the keys to the car and pulling out of the garage, I drove it through the garage door, my dad would be like, okay, because we're going to go back to driver's ed. But we just kept giving them positions of higher authority. There is a greater problem in our military, a evil cancer from 20 plus years at war where there is this subculture of violence and hate. Where does it come from? I don't know. Maybe our SecDef, who has kafir written on him, Pete Hegseth, is a tattoo that says kafir, infidel. He spews hate. He is a racist. He is prejudiced. This is the man in charge of our Defense Department who, without law, changed it to the Department of War. Not law, by the way. Just his little, it's like putting a sticky note on the fridge. Now, Department of War. Doesn't mean anything. And now we're blowing up boats off the coast of Venezuela. What happened? Just today, our president, I don't even have to make this up. You don't even have to have a clearance. The president said it. That he's now authorized the CIA to conduct operations on the ground in Venezuela to identify land strikes. What? I can't make this up.
CIA covert actions in Latin America have historically gone very well, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We build peace and democracy one bomb at a time. It's almost as if someone showed our administration all the secret files, and instead of looking at it and saying, let's not do that again, they're like, oh, let's redo that. It's horrible. When the global South get together and say, we're tired of it, do you blame them? When the Middle East get together and they say, we're tired of it, do you blame them? And do you think for 1 second that Israel is going to have our back? In every war that I have fought, from coast to coast, from continent to continent, I never once saw an IDF soldier standing there with me in a coalition. Ever.
So, Andy, how much time do we have for audience questions?
Well, we have another 25 minutes.
Okay. So we have 25 minutes for questions. Is there a microphone to walk around?
I believe there is one.
You're doing both the live and the
Let me see.
microphone.
Yep, I'm, this is like people's airways,
Well, if
Remember?
someone gives me the microphone to walk around, I will walk around the audience.
Okay, let me find one. Hold up.
Okay. Sorry, people on the
No, it's
live
okay.
stream.